everyone, welcome back to you all to the Commerce Positivity lecture. In today's lecture, we will be totally discussing about the concept or the meaning of communications, definitions of a communications given by different scholars, natures of the communications, process of the communications and the type of a communications. So let's start with the meaning or concept of communications. So communication is the process. It is a process of transforming informations between peoples or group for mutual understanding and confidence. It involves the flow of informations from senders to the receiver. The receiver must understand the meaning and message of the informations. It is only effective communications if the message has been received and understood by the receiver and sender knows that it has become understood. It can be taken as a process of sharing thoughts, opinions, view from one person's or organizations to another person's or organizations. It can be made between people through verbal and non-verbal means. It is one of the important functions of the management. A manager should communicate effectively to his or her subordinates to implement the plan and policies. No organizations can perform or functions without proper and adequate communications. The ability to communicate effectively with other members of the organization is considered as one of the most important skills of a manager. In an organization, communications serve as four basic functions such as controlling, motivating, expressing emotions, feeling, and providing informations. Different scholars have given the definitions of communications. According to Cat Davis, communication is a process. It is a process of passing informations and understanding from one person to another. Similarly, according to Newman and Summer, communication is an exchange of facts, ideas, opinions, or emotions by two or more persons. So simply in conclusion, we can say that communications may be defined as a process. It's a process of exchanging informations between two or more persons to achieve mutual understanding to each other. The meaning of a communications may be verbal and non-verbal. There must be two-way communications for effectively transformations of informations and its understanding. Now, let's study about the features of communications. What are the features of communications? The first features of communication is at least two party. Yes, of course, communications involve at least two party. One who transmit the message and another who receive the message. Communications remains incomplete unless there is exchange of thoughts and ideas between receiver and sender. Similarly, another feature here we have is that two-way process. Communication is a two-way process. It includes sending the message as well as receiving the reactions or response of the message. It deals with the transmissions of fact and feeling of two persons. Similarly, another features here we have is that understanding message. Yes, of course, communications does not mean merely sending or receiving the message. It also involves understanding the message. The communication is incomplete if the receiver does not understand the message as sent by the sender. Similarly, oral, written, and gesture is another features of communications. Communications take place in the form of oral, written, and gesture. In general, communication is understood only for spoken or written communications, but in reality, the gestures like signs and symbols are sometimes more effective than spoken and written communications. Similarly, another feature here we have is an indispensable part. Yes, of course, communication is an indispensable part of the management process. No organization can function without proper and adequate communications. It plays the some role in an organization as it is a nervous system in human body. It is the lifeblood of the management. Vertical, horizontal, and diagonal is another important natures of communications. Communication is the pervasive functions. It may flow vertically upward or downward between superior and subordinates. Similarly, it flow horizontal between peoples occupying similar rank in different department. It also flow diagonally between persons at different level in different department. Now, let's study about the process of communications. Well, communication is a process of transforming masses. It need at least two persons, that is sender and the receiver. A sender may be called source, which convey the ideas, and the receiver receive it, try to understand, and finally take an action. The first process of a communication here we have is sender. It is a preliminary step where senders create an ideas. In other words, a sender thinks what message should be sent, which is taken as the content of the communications. He must have some matters for expressions. This step. This step is very crucial because other steps are meaningless without the message of the sender. Similarly, the another step here we have is decoding. Decoding, the process of translating the message into defined forms such as spoken and written language that would be understood by the receiver is known as decoding. The sender organizes idea into a series of a symbol that he or she feel and communicate the message to. In text, receiver, the effectiveness of decoding depends on various factors such as skill, attitude, knowledge of both the receiver and the sender. Similarly, another process here we have is that channel. Yes, of course, channel refers to the transmissions of a message which confirm the methods selected in the predicting step. The sender chooses certain channel for communications through which a message travels to the receiver. Channel may be mass media or interpersonal channel. In selecting a channel, its effectiveness must be considered. The sender should always try to use the channel which is free from any barriers or distributing influence so that the message can be received by the receiver properly. Similarly, another step or process here we have is decoding. Decoding means translations of symbols encoded by the senders into ideas for understanding. Understanding the message by the receiver is the key to the decoding process. If the receiver does not understand the message, the communications become ineffective, as the perceptions of two peoples are quite different. Receiver is another important step of a communications process. In this stage, the receiver plays the necessary attentions in receiving the message. In case of oral message, a receiver has to be a good listener. Listening alone is not sufficient. He or she should also be willing to understand the message sent by the receiver. Similarly, the feedback is last stage or process of communications. Feedback is a response of the receiver received from the sender. He or she may like to ignore the message or to store the information received or to perform the tasks assigned by the senders or something else. Yeah, now let's study about the type of communications. The process of transforming the message, informations, view and thoughts from one party to another party is known as communications. Well, the first type here we have is horizontal communications. Well, When our informations are shared among the same hierarchies of a people, it becomes horizontal communications. Let's take one example. If a productions manager share the informations to marketing manager, then that form of a communication is horizontal communications. The main objective of this communication is to coordinate the efforts of different departments and people with similar hierarchy or positions. Similarly, another type here we have is that vertical communications. Yes, of course, the information which are shared among the supervisors and subordinates in an organization are known as vertical communication. On the basis of origin of informations, vertical communications can be classified into downward communications and the upward communications. Downward communications flow from top to bottom. Such communication consists message, order, instructions and directions which are supplied by superior to the subordinates. Upper communications is reciprocal of downward communications. It flows from top to bottom. It helps to pass problems, suggestions, complaint from subordinates to the superior. This type of a communication is very important for the mutual understanding of a people involved into the organizations. Similarly, the last type of a communications here we have is that diagonal communications. Diagonal communications, so also called crosswise communications. In this type of a communications, masses flow without hierarchy and the label. Let's take one example. Masses from supervisors of productions department transferred to the human resource manager. Diagonal communications is important to establish mutual understanding among the employers in the organizations. It represents complete communications process that take place in an organization's functioning smooth business. Yeah, I just hope you all understand the meaning of communications, definitions of communications given by different scholars, natures of communications, process of communications and the type of communications. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Take care.